Asatru, A Native European Spirituality by Stephen McNallen. Chapter 4. Who or what are the gods? Is there a god or gods, or are we alone in the universe? All other issues of destiny, purpose, and immortality hinge on the answer to that single question. The ancient wisdom of Europe clearly states that there are beings which are far beyond us in abilities, yet nevertheless intimately involved in our origins and destiny. These are the gods and goddesses of our faith. Often I simply call them the holy powers to highlight two essential truths about them. First, they are holy, special, set aside from the ordinary, awe-inspiring. They exist on the very margins of our comprehension, yet, as we shall see, they are intimately involved in all that we are. Secondly, they are powers. They are potent, energy-filled, with capacity for action on a scale we can hardly imagine. Beyond these two basic facts, there is only so much we can say about them. We can read the stories that have come down through the centuries. We can describe some of their attributes and their associations. For example, we can say that Odin relentlessly pursues wisdom, or that Thor is famed for his strength. We can describe our own relationship to these entities, emphasizing our kinship with them. The true essence of the holy powers, however, must be experienced by cultivating a relationship with them and by paying attention as they continually unfold their truths before us. Stumbling over a word. The average person is not emotionally limber enough to consider non-Christian, non-Jewish, non-Islamic gods to be real. So forget about gods for a moment and consider. If I said there were supernatural beings called devas, or bodhisattvas, or ascended masters, millions of people from India to Indianapolis would agree with me. All these words denote immortal beings of great spiritual power and superhuman abilities. But calling them gods or even demigods is just too difficult for most of us because we identify the G word only with the deity of the Bible. This is ironic. The word God does not come from ancient Hebrew, Latin, or Greek. Neither Moses, nor Jesus, nor Mohammed ever uttered this syllable. God is a pre-Christian Germanic word, originally referring to our deities, not something out of the Middle East. Our modern use of the term comes from the Old English God. This word derived in turn from an earlier Germanic term Guð, which was originally of neutral gender and could refer to divine beings in general. In Ulfilas's Gothic translation of the Bible, he used it to translate the Greek word theos and assigned Guð a masculine gender in order to specifically represent the single Christian deity. You'll notice that throughout this book I have capitalized God, not only when it refers to the Christian deity, but also when it describes our native gods. This is against all convention, but I am not inclined to favor the God of the Bible over the gods of the Northlands. Are the gods absurd? If we do not use the G word, the holy powers suddenly seem much more understandable to the modern mind. After all, millions of people believe that Dalai Lama is a being who has transcended mortality to become a god, and many of those believers are college-educated men and women living in the Western world. Our cultural conditioning limits our perceptions. Christians believe that a child born to a Jewish girl was fathered by a ghost, and was literally God made flesh. The Old Testament says that Moses waved a staff over the Red Sea and parted it so the Hebrews could escape from the Egyptians. Satan, a fallen angel, tries to trap men and women into an eternity of torment. People can go to hell forever for masturbating or for breaking dietary rules. I am not ridiculing Christians and Jews by making these statements. My point is that these beliefs seem bizarre to anyone outside the biblical religions. If we can rise above our preconceived notions, it is obvious that the beliefs of the Germanic peoples are no more improbable than the biblical accounts. Yet, intelligent, educated men and women will accept the Bible without question, while scorning similar tales from any other source. But why? Why should a beautiful goddess of love be less believable than the virgin birth? Why should Odin or Thor be more unlikely than the vengeful deity of the Old Testament? Why are the miracles of Jesus taken as truth, but those performed by the saints and shamans of 100 other religions are illusions, lies, or the work of the devil? Clearly, all supernatural claims are either equally probable or equally improbable. But unless we are materialists, we have to consider the possibility that all religions, even the ones we call pagan or heathen, might be valid. Conversely, atheists would take the opposite stance and say that all religions are equally wrong, that all gods, whether Judeo-Christian or pagan, are only illusions and self-deceptions. Fair enough. We'll leave it to others to explain why they believe in atheism. It is our task to say why we believe in the holy powers venerated by our ancestors in Europe, and we shall do so below. The reality of the holy powers. What makes us think that the gods of Asatru actually exist? For hundreds of generations, our ancestors believed the gods and goddesses to be as real as their own family, as real as the mountains hovering on the horizon, or the clouds blowing through the sky. It's easy today for us to say that they were ignorant and superstitious, but is that really true? Their brains were not significantly different from ours. In terms of sheer intelligence, our forefathers could have invented the theory of relativity or quantum mechanics 1,000 years ago. This didn't happen, of course, because centuries of conceptual foundations had not yet been laid. Discovering quantum mechanics is one thing, but inventing higher mathematics and all of classical physics at the same time, while planning raids, planting crops, is a little much to expect. Lack of brain power as such was not the problem. Tribal Europeans lived in an environment that selected intensely for intelligence and hard-headed practicality. Stupid people made mistakes that got them killed. Impractical dreamers likewise met tragic ends. Fools, self-deceivers, and the gullible did things that got them eliminated from the gene pool. And thus we can assume that the ancient Europeans would not have believed in the gods and goddesses unless they had some reason to do so. We, by comparison, live much more protected lives, sheltered from the natural environment and from our own ignorance. As a result, we are much more likely than our so-called primitive ancestors to believe in superstitions, such as the truth of the evening news, or the honesty of politicians, for example. As I mentioned some pages back, even the enemies of the gods, the Christian missionaries and later chroniclers, believed they were real. The Christian kings of Norway are said to have met Thor and Odin in mysterious encounters recorded in the sagas. One can argue that these stories are fiction, but the very fact that they were written down reflects a belief that the gods were not imaginary. Nowhere in the surviving sagas do the Christian writers suggest Odin, Thor, Freyr, or any of the other holy powers were delusions. Related to this is the oath the Saxons were forced to swear upon, converting to Christianity. In it, the old gods, Woden, Thunir, and Saxnot, were specifically named, thus implicitly recognizing their existence. The gods and goddesses are not confined to the ancient lore, however, they continue to manifest in men and women who call on them today. When we make requests of the holy powers, we often get dramatic results. In Christian terms, our prayers are answered. People get healed, children are born, broken lives are fixed, or the future is foretold. In short, belief in the gods works. Real, but different. To say that the gods and goddesses are real does not tell us much. The next question, logically, is what are they like? Aside from rare representations as statues or figures on old tapestries, the only descriptions we have of the holy powers are in the myths. Reading the stories, we find Thor pictured as a muscular man with a red beard and flashing blue eyes. Odin is a tall, older figure with a gray beard and one eye, and he sometimes travels in the company of his two wolves and ravens. Frey, on the other hand, is a fertility god with the appropriate masculine anatomy. Are we to take these vivid images literally? Modern Asatru leaves this up to the individual. Asatru are certainly free to accept these descriptions as real, and some choose to do so. Others take them symbolically as a way of comprehending that which seems incomprehensible. No doubt it was the same in ancient times, with views both simple and sophisticated having their adherents. Although there are no polls on the subject, I suspect that most Asatruer today think of myth as metaphor. The ancient stories then become symbolic ways of voicing spiritual truths. This is done on a number of levels, like the layers of an onion. On the surface, myths are entertaining tales that make a moral point or illustrate virtues like wisdom, sacrifice, bravery, or generosity. They tell us something about the nature of the gods, and they give us guidance for living our lives. But there is a deeper level. The myths are true in the sense of those things which never happened but always are. The stories of the gods become allegories and archetypes rather than history. Their meanings can be dissected through intuition and by comparison with related mythologies. The next level contains information understandable only to those ready to receive it. Specific techniques of spiritual evolution are encoded in some of the material. For example, the poem called the Avamal can be read as pragmatic advice for living a successful life or as a handbook of initiation. There are many instances of this kind of encoding in the Northern lore. Finally, the archetypal aspects of the myths constitute a sort of non-logical meta-language, the secret code of the unconscious. In this case, the myths communicate with us subtly, without words, influencing our minds and spirits. Even if the myths are metaphor, the gods and goddesses are still very real. But this doesn't mean that Thor is actually a muscular, man-like figure with a red beard, any more than Jehovah is a fatherly figure in a white gown sitting on a golden throne surrounded by clouds. The description of Thor in the myths gives us a way to relate to the being we call Thor, but it is not him. The gods and goddesses are not limited by the constraints of flesh and blood, so while it is convenient for us to picture Freya as a beautiful woman wearing a shining necklace, or Odin as having one eye, these are only representations. The gods and goddesses themselves are mighty beings, capable of manifesting to humans in any form they wish. The gods and goddesses as mysteries. I spent many years pondering the nature of the gods, inhabitants of a parallel universe or another dimension. Our future selves, cast backward in time, three-dimensional sentient projections from the collective unconscious. I have no answers. All I know is that they sometimes manifest in the most remarkable ways. At this point in my life, I am comfortable with the idea of the gods as mysteries. Oh, we can recite their myths and compare them to other deities in the Indo-European pantheons. We can make conclusions from cultic place names across Northern Europe. In short, we can describe the gods, but we can never define them. This is not to say we should not try, for like Odin, we are seekers of knowledge, wisdom, and power. In our own individual quests, we shall grow closer to the mystery, but never quite get there. Always it will remain just a little beyond our grasp. I have come to love the mystery, for with it comes a sense of awe, of wonder, of a sweetness that permeates the fabric of all that is. The lore. Throughout the ages, there have been men and women with the power to peer into other worlds. Shamans, mystics, or seers, they have seen wider realities than the one evident to our senses. These gifted individuals have traditionally come together in brotherhoods or sisterhoods dedicated to sharing and expanding their knowledge. Their explorations are the raw material of which religious truth is fashioned. All the rest of religious philosophy is commentary and custom, erected upon this bedrock of experiential knowledge. Today's seers and clairvoyants are poor imitations of these native psychonauts, stripped from ancient traditions, filled with the discordant images and thoughts of modern culture, lacking the support of the age-old fraternities of wise men and wise women for support. How could most modern psychics have more than mediocre success? The men and women who gave us the recorded lore of the Germanic peoples benefited from 100 generations of accumulated experience. Today's seers do not have that deep context. They receive a degraded inheritance that is part wisdom, but also part quackery and self-delusion. The secrets of our indigenous Northern European mystics are encoded in the myths. The two most important collections of these metalinguistic masterpieces are the Prose Edda and the Poetic Edda. Along with the literature of the sagas, the epic poems such as Beowulf, and the traditional tales of the folk, the Eddas constitute our lore. Our lore covers the big questions: the birth of the universe, the existence of the gods, and the origin of humankind, the structure of the invisible worlds surrounding us, our fate after death, the right way to live, human purpose, and destiny. But much of this wisdom is open to interpretation, and all of it must be applied with common sense. This is good because it makes us think for ourselves. The lore is the accumulated treasure of our wisest men and women over a very long period of time. That is not to say that it is a static thing. Indeed, it is our duty to explore and extend it. The holy powers are forever revealing their truths to us, bringing us always closer to them. And with care and prudence, we can continually add to this store of wisdom. The meaning of the gods and goddesses. We opened this chapter with the question of whether or not we are alone in the universe. We answered with a discussion of the holy powers. But the answer, as all good answers should do, begs still more questions. What do the gods and goddesses mean to us? Should we rejoice at their presence or cower in fear? What is our relationship to them? And what is the role of humans in the cosmos? We'll turn to those questions in the next chapter.